Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report. This is your host, Nick Giordano, and it's truly astonishing how so many want to turn a blind eye to the mounting evidence revealing the extent of the corruption within the Biden family and the complicity of the media industrial complex that's ignoring it. It's nothing short of disgraceful. But let's be clear. If you choose to dismiss these revelations that are coming down the pike simply because of your disdain for the former president and you suffer from TDS, then you are a major part of the problem. The level of corruption displayed by the Biden family makes Nixon look like a piker in comparison. It's infuriating when people say, well, if there's evidence of wrongdoing by the current president, then prosecute him. And they do that intentionally. They want to minimize and dismiss the allegations. But the truth is that that's the problem. We have an abundance of evidence, yet the bureaucracy, particularly the Department of Justice, they're engaged in a blatant cover-up to shield Biden and his family from any type of accountability. These self-anointed guardians of democracy do not want to see the downfall of the current president until they have someone ready to replace him. I mean, think about it logically. We have these revelations from IRS whistleblowers shedding light on the DOJ's interference into their investigation, and we see this dangerous pattern begin to emerge, a pattern that's been going on for quite some time, and one that goes far beyond the corruption of just the Biden family. Listen, while the corruption of the Biden family is toxic, and it's toxic to the political system, corrupt politicians are nothing new. Our country's seen a lot of corrupt politicians, and we survive it. It's not the most damaging thing to our country. However, the true danger, the larger threat, lies in the pervasive corruption and abuses of power within the bureaucracy itself. That's where the danger lies. They're working tirelessly to protect the Bidens. They want to conceal the potential crimes, and they use every available tool to target Biden's political opponents. That's the danger. But yet so many are blind to see that. What the bureaucracy is doing is not just another run-of-the-mill scandal. What they are doing represents a mortal threat to our republic, and it is a bigger story that demands our attention. It doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. We cannot allow these abuses of power to happen. And I think people really underestimate how deep it goes. You have Attorney General Garland, and I think people view him, they look at him like a harmless, useful idiot. But make no mistake about it, this guy is dangerous. And he's dangerous for a number of reasons. I'm going to break it all down in this episode. Before I do, make sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and share the PAS Report podcast with your family and friends and on social media. Don't forget to visit the PAS Report website, pasreport.com. And as I kick things off today, I first want to play a sound clip of the Attorney General himself. Take a listen.
Mr. Attorney General, Republicans in Congress have flirted with the idea of holding the FBI director in contempt. It's become a talking point on the campaign trail, the alleged corruption in the FBI and other federal law enforcement agencies. Do the American people have cause to be concerned about the integrity of the components of this Justice Department, and what do you have to say about how they're acting?
I certainly understand that some have chosen to attack the integrity of the Justice Department and its components and its employees by claiming that we do not treat like cases alike. This constitutes an attack on an institution that is essential to American democracy and essential to the safety of the American people. Nothing could be further from the truth. You've all heard me say many times that we make our cases based on the facts and the law. These are not just words. These are what we live by. They are the foundation of the way we make these decisions. The agents of the FBI, as well as the DEA, the ATF, our deputy U.S. Marshals, every day, often at great personal risk, protect the American people and secure its safety. Our cases are based on their work. I could not be more proud to work with them.
It really seems like Garland is taking a page out of the Lord Fauci playbook, right? Remember when Lord Fauci said that any criticism of him is an attack on science, essentially making himself the living embodiment of science? Well, Garland's doing the same thing. An attack on him is an attack on the Department of Justice. It's an attack that undermines the people's confidence, and thereby it's an attack on America. Now, his statement is much more dangerous than you realize. And I just told you how so many out there, they underestimate Garland. When you look at him, he seems harmless, but the truth is that when you combine his statement with the policies of this administration, you begin to see things more clearly. And I routinely bring up the Biden administration's national strategy for countering domestic terrorism. I bring it up for a reason. I know most of you are probably sick of me bringing this document up, but the reason I bring it up is because I see the threat that it poses. The administration's national strategy is a political document. It's a political document that weaponizes the system. It weaponizes the system to target political opponents. And it is sad how so few have even looked at this document. It's 31 pages. Read the damn thing yourself. And you could clearly see the danger it poses. Yet it's been ignored in our national dialogue. And I don't know why. I can't explain it. I can't explain why some, especially those that advocate for principles of liberty, that advocate against an all-powerful government, those that used to be the watchdogs of government. I can't imagine why they want to ignore this document, because the intent is clear. The document explains that criticism of the government is akin to a form of domestic terrorism. See, the logic they use is that those who criticize the government are expressing anti-government, anti-authority sentiment. Those criticisms can lead to incitement and domestic violent extremism. There is a reason that they never define what anti-government and anti-authority sentiment really means. They never define what incitement actually means. It is intentionally vague, and it applies to anything and everything that goes against their narrow-minded points of view. See, the bureaucracy, they try and get cute with their verbiage. They're wordsmiths. And when it comes to criticism of government and government abuses, well, they use words and phrases like perceived government abuses. So you're not really seeing government abuses. You only perceive it to be government abuses. Well, who gets to determine? The ones that are engaging in the abuse of the system? They're the ones that get to determine what government abuse really is? They're the ones abusing the system. And so again, I want to play the clip of Attorney General Garland one more time, because you need to listen to his words carefully.
Mr. Attorney General, Republicans in Congress have flirted with the idea of holding the FBI director in contempt. It's become a talking point on the campaign trail, the alleged corruption in the FBI and other federal law enforcement agencies. Do the American people have cause to be concerned about the integrity of the components of this Justice Department, and what do you have to say about how they're acting?
I certainly understand that some have chosen to attack the integrity of the Justice Department and its components and its employees by claiming that we do not treat like cases alike. This constitutes an attack on an institution that is essential to American democracy and essential to the safety of the American people. Nothing could be further from the truth. You've all heard me say many times that we make our cases based on the facts and the law. These are not just words. These are what we live by. They are the foundation of the way we make these decisions. The agents of the FBI, as well as the DEA, the ATF, our deputy U.S. Marshals, every day, often at great personal risk, protect the American people and secure its safety. Our cases are based on their work. I could not be more proud to work with them.
When you factor in the national strategy, you factor in all the government bureaucrats talking about unprecedented threats of domestic terrorism. You're seeing parents getting threat tagged because they complain at school board meetings. You have the president himself coming out and labeling his political opponents, nearly half the country, as fascists and the biggest threat since our country's founding. The intent of what Garland is saying is clear. Understand that you have every right to criticize the government. In fact, not only do you have a God-given right to question and criticize government, it is your civic obligation to question and criticize government. When you are no longer allowed to question or criticize government, you are no longer living in a free society anymore. You need to understand that, and you need to remember that, because that is exactly what Garland is saying. Now, in that clip, Garland came out and stated that the Department of Justice never ran interference for the Bidens and doesn't look at the law through the prism of politics, that the Department of Justice doesn't operate based on political points of view, that it hasn't been weaponized. He said this in response to the IRS whistleblower allegations that stated clearly the DOJ did exactly that. So we have two people making the exact opposite statements. And that's a mutual contradiction, meaning that two exact opposite statements cannot both be true. One has to be lying. And that's what I want to take up after the break. So hang tight and we'll be right back. Listen up, P.A.S. report audience. Experts say that China is hoarding a massive amount of food. They're soon going to have over 2/3 of the globe's corn reserves, over half its rice reserves, and over half its wheat reserves. But when asked about it, China lies. And one expert says that they, of course, will never admit to doing something like that. Well, what does China know that we don't? When it comes to the global food shortages, China is the canary in the coal mine. And you have to understand, China is the world's #1 food importer. They rely on the rest of the world to keep their people fed, so they can't afford to mess up. There'll be riots, civil panic, or even worse, when over 1 billion people can't eat, it's going to create a crisis for them. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for Americans like me and you? Food shortages. That's why it's a smart idea to stock up on a kit of the best-selling 4 Patriot survival food. Create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriot survival food kits. It's hand-packed in the United States. The kits are compact, stack easily. They have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners, and I can attest to that because I use 4 Patriots, and their 5-star reviews on the website rave about the flavor and taste. Right now, you can get 10% off your first purchase of 4 Patriot survival food by typing in the code PAS at checkout. Just go to 4patriots.com, use code PAS to get 10% off your first purchase of 4 Patriot survival food. That's 4patriots.com. Use code PAS. Welcome back, everyone. And before the break, I talked about the Attorney General of the United States coming out there saying that everything the IRS whistleblowers are saying are lies, that the Department of Justice didn't try and interfere with the Biden investigation, and then the IRS whistleblowers are stating exactly the opposite. And there's a mutual contradiction. Now, to summarize, Hunter Biden has been charged and plea bargained to 2 misdemeanor counts of failing to pay income taxes, about $100,000, and this falls under Section 26 U.S. Code 7203. His gun charge will be dismissed as long as he meets certain conditions, which I think is pretty ironic in and of itself, given that this administration and the Democrats constantly tout strict gun control laws, right? They want to see more gun control, but when it comes to the president's son, they don't want to enforce the gun laws that are already on the books. Kind of tells you a lot about how they are really all full of you-know-what. They're all a bunch of frauds. And after doing some digging, I can't find another case where Section 26 U.S. Code 7203 was treated as misdemeanors. In every case I find, these are usually felony counts. But let's keep pretending that Hunter Biden didn't get a sweetheart deal. We'll keep pretending that he didn't get a special deal because of his last name and the family he comes from. And another important thing to note is that prior to this deal, the IRS was actually building a case that Hunter Biden failed to pay taxes on $2.2 million, which includes $400,000 from Burisma. And a lot of this money actually traces back to when Joe Biden was then Vice President Biden. Now, I find it interesting. Do you think the feds normally go from $2.2 million to $100,000? Do you think they do that for everyone that has tax issues? Do you think that's like a special gift that they just take $2.1 million right off the top? And that's why I want to get to the IRS whistleblowers, because you had supervisory IRS special agent Gary Shapley. This is a guy with an impeccable career, impeccable record. He testified about obstruction, political interference, the potential of multiple underlying crimes, and according to him, they plan to pursue multiple felonies before they were thwarted by political appointees over at the Justice Department. We know this because their testimony and the underlying evidence to support their testimonies have been released. And consider that at the same time, we see the allegations of interference by the Department of Justice and the Biden administration. We're seeing the IRS whistleblowers. We're seeing FBI whistleblowers come out. We're seeing a lot of scrutiny being paid to Department of Justice and Merrick Garland himself, not really by the media industrial complex, they're still sweeping it on the rug, but by a lot of other conservative organizations, Republican organizations, and just throughout social media, you're seeing it more and more. So at the same time, we're seeing more pressure on the Bidens, the Department of Justice. Someone decides to leak the audio of former President Trump talking about the documents over at Mar-a-Lago. The same documents, the same audio tape that's a central part of the DOJ's case against President Trump, former President Trump. Do you think it's a coincidence that the leaked audio of the former president was aired by CNN at a time where there's more scrutiny being paid attention to the Bidens, And who do you think leaked that audio? Do you think it was the Trump legal team that leaked that audio? And when it comes to the leak, what story do you think the media is running with? Do you think they're focusing on the Bidens, or do you think they're focusing on this leaked audio tape now? Changing the subject, changing the story. Understand, coincidences do not happen in politics. Everything is done for a reason. Now, in the whistleblower allegations, the IRS whistleblower allegations, we learned that Hunter went so far as to write off prostitutes he solicited. I mean, think about that for a minute. Not for nothing, but one of the biggest red flags to the IRS is when someone attempts to write off the square footage of their home as a business expense. Now, I use my home for work. I don't write anything off. To me, it's not enough square footage, and it's not worth the headache of any red flags going off. So, I'm losing out on tax deduction, actually. I deserve more money back from the IRS. Yet, Hunter gets to write off hookers. Amazing how that works, right? Now, according to the supervisory special agent, the DOJ was involved in slow-walking the investigation, allowing the statute of limitations to expire on some of the more serious offenses. Again, this is not a coincidence. This does not happen in run-of-the-mill investigations. Normally, you have the federal government that's actually over-anxious, right? That they try and get as much information as they can. They try and collect as much evidence they can. They want to bring charges when they know they got a slam-dunk case. But not in this case. And in a meeting, investigators wanted to search Joe Biden's guest house where Hunter was living at the time. And according to Shapley, Assistant U.S. Attorney Leslie Wolf interjected in the meeting and said that she did not want to ask about the big guy and stated she did not want to ask questions about Dad. And those quotes are hers. Others in the meeting spoke up and they tried objecting to this, but U.S. Attorney Wolf discouraged investigators. They didn't want to pursue any lines of questioning related to the big guy, related to President Biden. And she said that the reason being is because she didn't see any specific criminality. Now, that's BS, of course, because there is evidence that the big guy was involved in Hunter's business affairs. I mean, just look at the China money and Hunter Biden's text messages warning the CEO of the Chinese energy company, CEFC, to pay $5 million. This is a text message from Hunter Biden. Quote, "I'm sitting here with my father and we would like to understand why the commitment made has not been fulfilled. Tell the director I would like to resolve this now before it gets out of hand. And now means tonight," end quote. Hunter goes on in another text, and he goes further, that if CEFC does not comply, quote, "I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge that you will regret not following my direction. I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father." And guess what? According to bank records, within a week, $5.1 million was wired to Hunter Biden by CEFC. Think about that. It reminds me of when President Biden said this.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others, to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, "No," I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, "You have no authority. You're not the president." The president said, I said, "Call him." I said, "I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion." I said, "You're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here." And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, "I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money." Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
I guess like father, like son. Now, we don't know if Hunter was telling the truth and Joe Biden was actually sitting right next to Hunter Biden as these text messages were going through. But what we do know is that Hunter Biden was at Joe Biden's home the day of the text messages because we have photos that are timestamped. And investigators wanted to geocode Joe Biden's phone to find out if they were together, but that was denied, of course. And what we do know is that multiple witnesses provided firsthand accounts, not hearsay, like not anonymous sources, not leaks, firsthand accounts, all stating that Joe Biden was intimately involved in his son's business affairs. We know that Joe Biden has repeatedly lied when he said he never once spoke to his son about his business dealings. Okay, believing that is like believing him when he says that Hunter Biden is the smartest person he knows. But more importantly, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that you're not going to give a degenerate crackhead millions of dollars whose father happens to be vice president for no reason. You're going to do it to buy access. And according to one of Hunter's business partners, Yi, the chairman of CEFC, used to brag about Joe, saying, "Biden is my guy." Amazingly, Wolf told investigators there was more than enough probable cause for the physical search warrant at the Biden guest house, but the question was whether the juice was worth the squeeze. They were worried about what the optics would look like. Are you kidding me? What the optics would look like. She said, a lot of the evidence in the investigation may be found in the guest house of former Vice President Biden, but there's no way that they're going to be able to get it approved. And nobody wants to ask questions. Well, why wouldn't it get approved? I mean, you have all this evidence. Why wouldn't it get approved? Gee, I wonder. Is it because of the last name? We also learned that the FBI wouldn't share the contents of the Biden laptop, which they verified and authenticated in 2019, and the FBI wouldn't share them, even though the FBI acknowledged the presence of potential tax crimes may be on the laptop. They also refused to approve search warrants and even gave the Biden legal team a heads up. Apparently, there were documents in a storage unit, and when the IRS investigators sought to get a search warrant, they prepared the affidavit, as they normally would, to support why they wanted the search warrant of the storage unit. But again, you had U.S. Attorney Wolf object to this. And not only did Wolf object, she notified the Biden legal team, giving them a heads up. It must be nice, right? It must be nice that when you're under an investigation, the feds notify your legal team that they intend to search a storage unit to find evidence of potential crimes, which gives you plenty of time to clear out that storage unit, to remove any potential evidence. How many people under criminal investigation get that type of treatment? I don't think many do. I'm just going out on a limb. I don't think many get that. We all know the answer to that one. Another IRS whistleblower stated he has never had a case where if they needed to get records and preserve them, that they didn't do everything in their power to get a search warrant approved and get moving on it expeditiously. He's never seen that before. Now, I know I am pointing out how U.S. Attorney Wolf was running interference, but she wasn't the one calling the shots, because according to reports, she actually wanted to levy much harsher charges against Hunter Biden. According to reports, she wanted to charge him with felony tax evasion, 3 counts of filing false tax returns, all felonies, and 3 counts of failing to pay taxes. There were also FARA issues, failing to register as a foreign agent. We certainly heard a lot about foreign agents when Trump was in office, how many people got convicted and went to jail over the same thing, FARA violations. Now, Hunter Biden was certainly acting on behalf of a foreign entity that's easily provable, and yet nothing. We also know that there were some on the investigative team that wanted Washington, D.C. and California's Central District to allow charges to be brought against Hunter in those jurisdictions as opposed to Delaware, because that's where crimes have taken place. But a Biden-appointed U.S. attorneys in these areas refused. They didn't want to bring charges, even though they had enough evidence to bring those charges. When there was a request to give the investigative team special counsel status, that request was denied. It was rejected. Understand that this was all going on throughout the 2020 elections, and not a single thing ever leaked out. In Washington, D.C., everything leaks like a sieve, but not a single thing leaked out in this. And the reason it didn't leak out is because it's clear. The entire weight and power of the federal bureaucracy existed to protect Biden's viability as a presidential candidate. The more we learn, the more we see how intricately involved the feds were in manipulating the 2020 election, the 2016 election, and they're at it again in 2024. I mean, this really is a disgrace. You have people that constantly want to throw Watergate around. This makes Watergate look more like a jaywalking violation. And not for nothing. How does President Biden respond to the allegations of corruption? He laughs it off. Where's the money? Ha ha ha. Where's the money? And then he has the nerve to joke around about selling state secrets.
I was just thanking, anyway, I started off without you. And I sold a lot of state secrets and a lot of very important things that we shared. Now, all kidding aside, look.
He doesn't even have to pretend. He doesn't even have to hide it because he knows that the full weight of the bureaucracy is protecting him. To come out and joke around about political corruption at the highest levels and the abuses of power within our bureaucracy.
How dare you!
And yet so many are still willing to defend this, justify it, sweep it under the rug. It's not a big deal. Now, everything I told you, it's not speculation on my part. It's not based on the way I want things to be. It's not based on my perception of how I see things. It's not based on leaks and anonymous sources. Everything I said is backed up by eyewitness testimonies, by records, bank statements, the Biden's own text messages and voicemails, emails by government officials. It's been authenticated. So if you say that there's no evidence of Biden corruption, there's no evidence of the bureaucracy covering up for Biden and the Biden family business, you're either uninformed, a partisan hack, or straight up lying. And it's clear that the Attorney General of the United States is lying because the evidence is more than overwhelming. And that's the evidence that we actually know of that's been made public. Imagine all the evidence behind the scenes that we haven't seen yet. Imagine all the evidence that may have been destroyed all because the feds tipped off the Biden legal team. And we still don't know anything about the 17 recordings between the CEO of Burisma and the Bidens, where 2 of those recordings are allegedly with Joe Biden. We have no idea about that. We haven't gotten any answers, even though that story broke 3 weeks ago. Did the FBI get the tapes? Were they in possession of the tapes? Did they hear these tapes? Or are these tapes still with the CEO of Burisma in Ukraine, and why haven't they attempted to get these tapes? The craziest part is that I didn't even bring up the FBI whistleblowers and everything going on within the FBI, including the FBI investigating hundreds of their own agents simply because they go against the prevailing narrative. Truly stunning. But I'm going to talk more about that next week because I have a great guest coming on that you're not going to want to miss. I have George Hill coming on, so I have to plug it for Monday. You're going to want to tune in. Spectacular. Now, everyone out there, you can either deny the obvious, try and write me off as a conspiracy theorist. Oh, he's just, some crazy conspiracy tinfoil hat theorist. He's a conservative, but that says more about you than it does me. So you could deny the obvious, or you can man up. Accept the fact that this administration is thoroughly corrupt. Accept the fact that the bureaucracy engaged in a massive cover-up and is still engaging in that cover-up. Accept the fact that our institutions are thoroughly corrupt and that they did it to themselves, not because people like me question the integrity of these institutions. It's because they've given us numerous ammunition not to trust them over the course of the last 20 years. They only have themselves to blame for the lack of trust in these institutions. You can either deny what's going on, or you could accept the abuses that are occurring, and we could start working together to rein in an all-powerful abuse of bureaucracy. If you want to keep pretending, that's fine. We could keep pretending and allow the abuses to get worse and worse. We could do that. And if we keep doing that, then don't complain to me when the tables are turned. Don't complain to me when we realize we're living in a totalitarian state. Don't complain, because you were warned. Now, if you found the content of this episode informative, please give the P.A.S. report a 5-star rating. Take 30 seconds to write a review, particularly on Apple Podcasts. Also, I just found out that Stitcher is shutting down. So if you listen on Stitcher, you now have to find another means of listening to this podcast. So make sure you do that. You can check it out. We're on all the podcast platforms out there. On Monday, I got George Hill, retired supervisory intelligence analyst, FBI whistleblower. He's coming on, so you're going to want to make sure that you tune in. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back on Monday with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASreport.com and follow us on Twitter at PAS Report.